welcome to Writing the Wrong Way, where we talk about how writing works, how writers work, and why the best writers risk being strange. And today I have two great guests, Lyndon Radchenka, also known as one half of the Infinite Studio, and Justin Currie, known the world over, as they like to say, as Chasen Artwork. And I want to talk today about exposing yourself to feedback. So something that Mike Sanders, who was visiting one of my classes a little while ago, he's a filmmaker, among other things, and he was being asked by some of my film writing students a little while ago, what's the most important thing? And he said the most important thing is exposing yourself, getting a feedback loop. He called it a feedback loop. You need some sort of system whereby you are putting your work out there and getting feedback. And I want to just kind of dig into that a little bit, because I've noticed that with writers, especially, maybe it's true with artists as well. Justin can maybe fill us in a bit more of that. But I've noticed with artists, and especially writers I talk to, they often have a lot of anxiety about putting their work out into the world. And I think there's a natural reticence people have when they don't know if they're quote unquote ready to put their work out there. A lot of people I just have noticed seem to have an anxiety or a frustration connected to I don't know how I'm going to get my work out there. But then once they have solved that problem, they sometimes get into the other problem of they just aren't comfortable doing it. They feel like they're exposing themselves, and they also just are anxious about the feedback that they're getting. And so there's sort of three things that I want to kind of circle around. One is getting feedback from your peers, getting feedback from your audience, and getting feedback from critics. So sort of what are your thoughts on these ways of getting feedback? How much should you care? What should you care about? And so on. Why don't we start with you, Justin? Like, what do you think about when you put your work out there? Could you maybe just talk a little bit about like some of the ways you do that and kind of what you do with the responses that you get, if anything?
Yeah, when I think about feedback, coming from like kind of visual background and training, my first thought is back to when I was in the graphic design program. We would do like class-wide crits. So you would do a typography poster and you would present it to the class, and then everybody would kind of take turns saying stuff they liked about it, what worked, what didn't. And I found those like especially devastating because you were getting kind of ripped apart by your peers. And when I think about why it hurt so much or why it meant so much at that point, is because I was like a fledgling artist without really anything in my portfolio yet. So anything that when I finally had something finished, it was, there just wasn't much else in my portfolio. So that one piece meant so much to me. So to have people say like critical things about it hurt a lot more. Like the skin was a lot thinner. And as I go forward in my career and I have more and more and more, even if I have peers point out like mistakes or flaws or something like that, it doesn't hurt nearly as much because I have such a vast portfolio and so many things on the go and stuff like that. So I've just kind of analyzing how I deal with critique. That's something that comes up in my mind is the more you have, the easier it is to take because you have just a bigger portfolio to draw from.
Yeah, I was talking about that exact thing with my daughter once, where I'd gotten some negative review of some book, and she had just was asking me about it, and she was saying like, well, how do you deal with like getting when you get like negative feedback? And I said, well, one of the things that I think trips people up when they're just starting out is they have like 10 poems, and so if somebody rejects one or doesn't like one, it's like they're rejecting your work. Like it starts to symbolize, if you have like just a couple things done in your portfolio, as you say, they sort of symbolize the totality of your portfolio. But if you have like 10,000, if you've written 10,000 poems, it's just another poem you've written.
Right.
So you might have an emotional attachment to it for other reasons, like it matters to you that you wrote that thing or made that artwork. It's not that it doesn't matter, but it doesn't symbolize your art as a whole in the same way. And so if someone doesn't like it, it's like, well, if you don't like that one, maybe you like this one, you know?
Yeah.
You know, it starts to take less of the symbolic value of your artwork as a whole, and so you can be a bit more dispassionate about people's reactions, I find.
Yeah, it just gets, it's so much easier to hear it, and then you can kind of analyze it a bit more critically and not take it so with like so much emotion to it. After like graphic design, I worked at a design firm and then a video game company where I had an art director or a senior designer who, like everything I did, they would find things wrong with it to fix. So, like with my drawings, most of the time people only say nice things. Oh, that's so cool. You're so talented. Good for you, right? And then going to a setting where, like, no matter what you did, there's things to fix. There's things to change. Like, this arm isn't looking right. Fix that. Change the lighting. Try this color scheme. Do this. Do that. Like, their job is to find things to change, right? So going from just displaying art to like friends and family and kind of online and getting nice flowery critiques to in the workplace where it's, this is business, this needs to be a certain level of professionalism, like you need to fix this. I'm really like, that kind of stuff was kind of, it was the same thing. Like I took it a little personally at first because I think everybody does. But I'm so glad I went through a couple of years of that, because I often think about that. Like now, even though like a lot of the times I'm not working with art directors or other people, I will try to analyze my stuff. Like, what if this was in the video game company? What would they tell me to do over? If I was in the design firm, like what would they tell me to fix and fine tune? So I think it's really important to have some kind of structured, not like critique and feedback, but like that you need to fix this to make it better, kind of feedback.
What about the dark side of that? Because the other side of that is a producer who's noting you to death, right? Because there is that side of that where you've got a producer. Like you see this all the time in movies, or you see most extremely in movies, where it's like, yes, there's a producer there. Yes, it is their job to give you feedback. But if they feel like if they're not giving you feedback, they don't have a job.
Right.
And like, so sometimes they have great notes for you, and other times they're just giving you notes to justify their existence.
Right. They have to put their mark on it in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's a justifiable side of it. Like if they are the producer and you're a hired gun, yes, it is ultimately their expression on some level.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that their notes are good. Like you can get in that situation where they're professionals, maybe they know more than you, maybe they're giving you good notes.
Yeah.
But there's also like the professional who doesn't know more than you and is giving you bad notes. And so how do you kind of deal with that, or how do you know when you're encountering that?
Yeah. When I worked at the design firm, we actually had a note at one point. It was something along the lines of, "My niece likes green. Can we try this logo in green?" kind of thing. Like we would get notes like that. And there is, you know, I'm 2 steps down the ladder removed, so there's nothing, I don't have any, I can't counter that. And so we had to do like just the whims of, you know, clients who know nothing about illustration or design, just throwing stuff out there. And we build them for it. And that, I always, still to this day, I hate it. And it's part of the reason I don't do a whole lot of client work. And I finally reached the point in my career where that kind of stuff was very frequent as I started out. As I was getting my bearings, building my portfolio, starting my freelance, you'd run into a lot of clients that, you didn't agree with their artistic choices or their direction, but you need to complete the job. And the more and more I noticed when I did my own thing and when made my own decisions, that artwork would turn out better. The poster would sell more than just so I'd make more financially. And so I was kind of seeing, like, with numbers to back it up, my decisions making me more and doing better than like these client decisions. And it finally got to the point where I don't have to take on clients like that anymore. And the clients that are hiring me because they trust me to do the thing I'm good at and don't have as many notes. It's weird. Like the bigger the client, the less nitpicky and note they are. Like Disney and Netflix and Marvel, they didn't have a lot of notes. But friend of a friend who doesn't have any budget has a ton of things he wants to see different.
The other thing I wanted to chime in on in this respect is when it comes to receiving feedback like you're describing, one of the things that I've tried to keep in mind is that you need to have a sense of what you intend that project to look like. And so when you're receiving feedback, if you have the autonomy to reject notes, because there are instances where you are allowed to say no to notes and some where it's a client and you have to sort of do what you're told. If you're in a position where you're allowed to reject notes, you really need to have a sense of what your vision for that project is and be able to objectively look at the notes you're being given and assess whether or not those notes are actually improving the work or not, it sounds like you've developed, Justin, because as you said, over the years you do what you want and you tend to come out ahead of some of the feedback that you've been given.
Not do what I want, but follow my own intuitions.
Correct. You have a sense of the project.
Yeah.
But then there are going to be instances where, as you said, you aren't allowed to reject the feedback, and at that point, I mean, in a sense, when you're work for hire, it's not your project the same way, and so you have to recognize that it's not a reflection of your own work in the same sense. It's like I've spoken to writers and editors who will say, if someone reads a bad book, they very rarely blame the editor for it, which I think is true. Because it's ultimately the writer in that position who has the final say on what edits are making it into the book or not. But in a work for hire project where the client is the one that has the final say, you're not necessarily going to blame the artist all the time for how that client project turns out. Like if McDonald's hires you to make an ad and you do what they say and it looks terrible, no one is going to say, "Oh, Justin did a terrible job at that." They're going to say, "Oh, that's a crappy McDonald's ad."
McDonald's.
Well, McDonald's might say that, but I see your point. I think you have to kind of though learn that, right? Like you have to learn by taking the notes, the bad notes. You have to learn what's a bad note. But I think you hit the nail on the head. Like you need to have a sense of whether they're making the thing better or worse, and that requires, I think, one, practice, but it also requires you to literally have a process of taking notes, and then you look at it. You need to get dispassionate about it, and I think your point is great. Like you have to have a level where your portfolio has to get big enough because you've made enough work. And you have to have taken enough notes from people that you can start to sense, you can kind of start to push your emotions about what you work to the side a little bit, and you can start to look at it and like, is it working? Like, is it getting better or is it getting worse? And one of the uncomfortable things you have to get into is you do have situations where they're paying you to implement their note, and your job now is to say no. Because your ultimate service to them is to reject their note, and it can put you in a real hard position sometimes. I've found, but it does sort of weirdly become your job at that point.
Yeah. And sometimes that's an easier conversation than others. Like I'm thinking of one example in particular. Earlier in my design career, I was tasked to do a logo. And the point of a logo is it's supposed to represent your whole company, right? And so this client in particular wanted a logo that had like a field, had a cow, had a barn, had these birds, had a duck, had him and his wife on like he wanted an entire storybook like crammed into a single icon. And so that's when it came, like rather than like rejecting the notes, it's almost like you now have to educate your client on how this needs to function in the world, and all that detail is going to disappear if you're going to, like, this is supposed to be made into like a little emblem on a shirt or a hat or a business card. Like, you can't do that. So you have to, in most cases, the really out there outrageous changes is more of like the client's ignorance as to how this works, more so than like they're just being
And it's
stubborn.
something that we run into in our book projects also. I know you and I have both, at times, rejected editing notes that were suggested to us.
Yeah.
Jonathan and I had a conversation last week. I was doing edits for my for my current upcoming book, Hero Man, and one of the suggestions that the editor made essentially was neutering one of the jokes, and it was clearly because they didn't pick up the references that I was using. They weren't necessarily as familiar with the sort of pastiche parody elements
they
that I
didn't
was.
get the joke.
Yeah, they didn't get the joke,
Right.
and so I'm not gonna, neutralize a joke, and just have filler text instead. So I rejected the edit because with the explanation, this joke was missed, and it weakens the work by changing it.
Let's just quickly to dig into that process. It's not that it's just you got a note and rejected it. It's that you got a note and you're like, okay, let me ask you guys, what do you think the basis of this note is? Are they right? So you even got feedback on the feedback.
Yeah. I said, what do you guys think of this note?
Then you sorted like whether you thought our feedback on the feedback was any good.
Yeah.
And then that helped you kind of inform like the feedback, how are you going to respond to the feedback?
Well, there's a famous quote, and Gregory in the background of the studio will correct me on the source if I misquote. I think it's Neil Gaiman who said, "Often I'll get an edit and I'll reject the solution, but recognize that it presents a problem. The fact that I'm getting a note means that there's a problem, but I will often reject the proposed solution."
Yeah, I say that a lot, but I don't know where it's coming from originally. It's not. I know it's not something I invented.
Yeah.
But,
yes. Just that idea that if there is a note coming, and so I'm tying this into the example we're talking about because I looked at their feedback that they were giving, or the note that was being suggested, and I didn't go with what they said, but I also didn't leave what I originally was using. I twisted it then to fix it
because they weren't getting the joke.
That's right.
So that means some people aren't getting the joke now.
Yeah.
It's not like because they're readers, right? Like they're a cultured reader. They're an editor. So they're a person who can read carefully, can read well. For some reason, the joke's not landing on them. It could be that the reference they don't get. But in this case, I would say it was an example where it wasn't dumb enough.
That's right. The joke wasn't dumb enough.
It wasn't obvious
so I made
enough.
it more dumb.
Yeah, because it wasn't obvious enough. It was just kind of, and so, but I think that's a great example of
someone is flagging a problem.
Sometimes. Yeah. And so what I've found with those kind of notes is I usually take one of two approaches. So either one, I'll just pretend that I did it.
Sure.
Sometimes with the client that works.
It's true. I'm not gonna lie. I've done that as well. Of the 5 notes I get, I
did
three
it.
and
Yeah,
leave
you
those
do
other
three,
two, and they never come back to the other two.
Yeah, because really it was something else. And then once they see it again with like the 3 good notes implemented, they're like, oh yeah, they just almost forget their original note.
Yeah.
Because it's not a problem anymore. But the other thing that I'll sometimes do is like you're saying is I'll just make a different change. And that will again solve the problem. Like again, often they're suggesting a note because they are trying to solve a problem, but they don't really know how to solve the problem. But maybe that's
Maybe
my
something
job.
like this. Yeah.
I was going to point that out as well. Like, not necessarily taking their suggestion for that change, but making a change there regardless.
Yeah, because
right?
they've
Like,
identified there's a problem here.
there's something not quite right about this. What about this? Like, well, that idea sucks, but you're right. There is something not right.
Yeah.
About
How
this.
can I improve on your suggestion?
Yeah.
Now we're talking about peers and professionals in this, or even clients, which are kind of in that realm. But what about an audience? What about the audience is coming back to you, giving you feedback, whether it's hey, I love this, or I hate this, or something in between, where they're coming at you in some way, shape, or form, and responding to it. Like, what do you do with those responses? Like, how much do they matter to you? How seriously do you take them? Do you learn something from them? What do you do with that?
I don't have the fame to comment on this the same way that Justin does. Justin has a much larger audience than I do, but everyone always says that you shouldn't make a work for a specific audience. You shouldn't chase a
I would
trend.
say everyone always says that.
Yeah, I know.
Some people say the opposite. Well, but people will say the same thing. They'll double speak. They'll say, "Oh, you shouldn't chase the audience." Then they'll also say, "Oh, you got to make work that your audience is going to respond to."
Right, because we're living in a product of capitalism.
I work for my audience. I love my audience. I'm trying to give my audience great things.
Yeah.
And then they also say, "Oh, but I don't chase the audience."
Yeah.
So how do you? I think you can reconcile those things on some level, but how do you? What do you pay attention to what the audience tells you?
Absolutely, yeah. So primarily, I set up booths at Comic-Cons all over the world, and I showcase my portfolio of prints, and you can buy it as a 12 by 18 print. You can get it as a canvas. You can get these limited edition foils, and I'm in cities all over North America, and I've done Australia and UK, and people kind of vote with their dollars, right? Like, if people really like a print, they're gonna buy it. And if they don't like it, or they don't get it, or they don't want it, then they don't buy it. So it's an in-person interaction. So nobody is ever offering negative feedback in person. It's kind of like, the anonymity of the internet, when you'd never say those kinds of things to somebody in person, right? So when somebody sees you're the artist in person, they only ever say good things. But when a piece isn't working, it just never moves. I can every time I come up with a new piece, I will put it front and center. I will make it like the most obvious piece on that table. And after a couple of days, hundreds of thousands, sometimes thousands of people have seen that piece and nobody comments on it or likes it, then I know that this piece was kind of a dud. So that's kind of the feedback that I'll get.
And how do you feel about that, though? Like, does that mean you're never going to make a piece like that, or does it, break your heart a little bit, or do you just think, oh, maybe there's something wrong with it, it needs to be better, or like, how do you respond?
So
when
all
that
those
happens?
things, yeah. So sometimes, like, okay, I tried this direction, and I'm proud of that piece, but like, people don't want this on their wall, and that's okay. And again, it goes back to, like, I am pumping out 2-3 paintings a month. So if one of those paintings is a dud, it doesn't matter, because I already made like 4 more by the time it sinks in that one's a dud.
Yeah, you might still like it, but
I might still
for
like
some
it,
reason
yeah.
they don't.
Yeah, for some reason it didn't work.
Maybe it'll come back around.
Yeah, and that's happened as well. So I've retired pieces and then brought them back, and suddenly they're selling. And then other times I've done a piece and I know there's something to this, people aren't buying it, but okay, I'll go back in and I'll adjust some things. I'll change colors. I'll change like a bit of a feel, and suddenly that piece catches on. So that's happened a handful of times as well.
Do you ever have this? There's like, say, 2 pieces on the table, and somebody comes up and is looking at piece A and like, oh my God, I love this so much, so great, amazing, and then they buy piece B instead.
Yes, yeah. People people come, oh my God, yeah, I really like this. This is amazing. But I'll get this other one.
Give me the Balrog.
Yeah. So
what do you think that is about?
I don't know. Yeah, it's we often talk about at the studio how I'm primarily a poster artist. I have lots of prints and posters, but I also have graphic novels. And something that always kind of irks me at the table is I have pieces that I've spent 70 to 200 hours on, and then I have pieces that I'll do in a day. And it hurts my heart a little bit. Like, it's still my art, I'm still winning, but when people take the piece that I spent a lunch hour on over the piece that I spent hundreds of hours on, because it's just, that's not working for them, and this is, and it's the same with books, right? I put months into this book, but it's hard to sell that book. But this poster that you did in 2 hours 11 years ago, I want that.
Give me the Balrog.
Musicians often complain about that.
Yeah.
They'll complain that their hit song is the one they wrote in 10 minutes. It just came to them, they wrote it, they're like, oh, it's not even a great song. And then that'll become the hit. Whereas the song that they worked so hard on, it took so long, they labored for a month, it's like nobody listens to it.
We don't want to hear your new stuff, just play the ones we know. Yeah.
Just play Freebird.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of them embrace it, and some of them, just don't. Like Kurt Cobain stopped playing Teen Spirit.
Yeah, yeah. And I think we're all kind of chasing that, right? Like a print artist especially. Like, you'll have a piece that'll light the convention on fire, and you'll sell out of it like twice. I've done pieces where I had to reprint it not once, not twice, but 3 times in a weekend. And that's amazing. And when it happens, it's great. And then I think I'm always kind of chasing that. And after doing this for over 10 years, I still have no idea when I'm painting a piece if it's going to be that or not.
Does it change what you make? Because you'll sometimes do series, you know. Although I don't see you necessarily do series. I don't know if that's really tied to people's responding in any way, shape, or form. Because you seem to do a lot of them, and then you'll show people them.
Yeah, I think like when I plan out a piece, I usually have an idea of how I could make this 3 or 4 prints, but I'll finish the one, I'll see how it does, and then so actually just recently I finished so it's my 10-year reunion of being Chasing Artwork coming up in a couple weeks.
Ooh.
And yeah, so I did an original piece of a computer kind of an exploded view of an old computer with a bunch of plants and goldfish swimming around, just like a fun abstract piece. And I had a lot of fun doing it. I like drawing electronic stuff. I like exploded views. I like drawing plants. So just kind of checked all these boxes. And as I was making it, it's like, this would be really cool if there was this computer and then another piece where it's an old radio that's been exploded and there's little songbirds. And then another one with like an old camera that's like, so I have like this 3-part series planned out based on this one piece that I just had fun doing. And so in a couple weeks in Calgary, if I sell, 10, 15, 20 of these pieces, that's huge. So I know there's a demand for whatever this was that just tickled my fancy.
Your Terminator pieces sort of has that similar aesthetic.
Nobody wanted that.
Really?
Nobody.
But nevertheless, you made more pieces that have a similar aesthetic.
Yeah, so maybe that's it. I'm still chasing. There's something to that aesthetic that just did not work.
Chasing artwork.
With Terminator. I thought, I love Terminator. I thought this piece is going to do well for sure.
Do you think people don't recognize it as Terminator for some reason?
It's pretty obvious. I don't know.
I would think so, but I was just wondering. Because it's not like
so much like Lisa's
Arnold. Do you think that you care fundamentally, though, about how they react?
Absolutely, I do. But that whole, again, it goes back to it. I don't have to put as much emotional weight into it because I know even if this piece flops, these other ones are going to carry it. These older ones for sure are going to carry it. So I'm in this amazing position where I can kind of do whatever I want. And something's going to work and something's not going to not. But in the end, it all kind of evens out. Yeah,
you're not going broke if they don't like it 1 year. Whereas, somebody who's building the career a bit more or is in an earlier stage, I think often they have a sense that it really matters more so how people respond to it, or they're chasing a certain response, whether it's smart or not.
But I think it's so important to experiment, right? If you're really, really concerned about that, you're not taking risks and chances. And I think what's great about what we're doing at the studio here is we're doing what we want and what we're passionate about. And if it's a financial success, great. But if it's not, we have that solid foundation.
Sure.
Yeah. So we get to keep trying new things.
Yeah. I don't care that much how people respond to things, but I do pay attention.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to engineer certain responses. So I want them to kind of be confused at this point. I want them to be angry at this point. I want them to think this joke is funny. So I'm really attentive, in that sense, which kind of gets me into a weird position sometimes because I'll get annoyed. Where I get annoyed about it is if they have the exact response I want them to have, and then they think I've done something wrong. When I get critics review my work, who are mostly very kind, once in a while it'll be I'll get really upset about the particular critical response. I'm talking a critic reviewing your work, because they'll say all the things that they'll basically list all the reasons why it worked, and then say it didn't work.
Right, they cut down to the foundation of they see the bones of the project.
They don't see it though. Oh. They think that they're producing an engineered reaction that I've engineered, and then saying I'm not in control of their reaction.
Gotcha.
So it gets up. I just get annoyed about it. But do you ever get have you ever had that sort of critical review response where people are saying Justin Currie, and here's why Chasing Artwork is great, or here's why Chasing Artwork is the worst, Like, and I don't know if there's that much. I don't know if you really have venues for that in the art world in the same way as writers get book reviews.
Is there an artist equivalent for book reviews?
Yeah.
Not as much because we're kind of the wild west of Comic Cons. It's basically like the indicators for success are there people walking around with your artwork, with your product, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't
Sure.
matter if I don't like Gregory's artwork. If I see his artwork walking by my booth all day, every day, I know he's winning, right?
Sure.
So here's my question as I've been sitting here. Like you said, Justin, it's easier to take feedback, especially negative feedback, when you have so many things that you can be working on. But for someone who's newer in the field and doesn't have that wide pool that is going out and they're doing their first show or they're submitting their first book, like how do you prepare someone like that for their first round of probably negative feedback?
Rejection.
Yeah.
How do you get ready for rejection?
How do you get
That's a
ready
good
for your
question.
first rejection?
I liked it because, well, I didn't like it, but I'm just saying, like, how I got ready for it, I guess, is the way to put it, is I was reading a lot of, what really helped me was reading Stephen King. And particularly, Stephen King has these short story books that he would put out, and at the end of the book, he would always write a little blurb about where the idea from the story came from or where it was published. And he would like list things like that. And I remember one of the books reading it, and he mentioned, this story was rejected by, the New Yorker, and then it was published, somewhere else, in Esquire or something. And I remember like reading this and thinking, oh, Stephen King's still getting rejections,
Yeah. Like still.
Still. And then he had also written elsewhere another part about like how when he started writing, he would get all these rejections, and he put a nail on his wall and he would post them on the nail, and then at a certain point there were so many rejections he had to get a railroad spike and like start posting on the railroad spike. I remember reading that and thinking, so it was just because he was talking about the actual process of getting rejected, and because of course flash forward, Stephen King succeeded and did well, and I'm reading his stuff and I think it's good. I that carried a lot of weight for me, like that another writer was open about talking about the process, and I just started to realize like, professional writers get rejections, so if I get rejections, that means I'm a professional writer. And I started to, it just sort of took the air out of it for me, on a certain level. So like, it was still kind of annoying. Like I remember getting rejection from Weird Tales, and Weird Tales had this, really sent me this great typewriter rejection. If people go to my website, jonathanball.com, and search Weird Tales, they can find the rejection. I like scanned it and put it up there. And it's just, and I go into like why I liked the rejection and all the great things about the rejection and how to kind of read a rejection in certain levels. So, but anyway, it was just so exciting to get a rejection from Weird Tales. Like the editor of Weird Tales read my story.
Yeah, they came across their desk and they
didn't like it, but they read it.
But I think it's just important to go into anything with realistic expectations, right? If you're only ever going to take your story and submit it to one place, like already you've kind of failed in my books, right? You need to take it to a whole bunch of places. And there's so many stories of famous authors, and like J.K. Rowling, right? Like nobody wanted to touch her books, and Stephen King, nobody wanted his short stories, and so going in knowing that everybody kind of flubs those first couple of tries, and that's just part of it, right? No, you're not going to be perfect out of the gate.
Yeah.
What do you say to the people though who, because I've seen people like this where they'll get, their thing is like, well, if someone's going to reject it, why even send it?
It's part of growing and learning and being a person. Especially like if you want to be professional and be serious about this, like can't have that mentality.
Yeah, I really. It's not.
And they think they're not ready. They're like, well, I'm not ready, so why send it?
Yeah.
So not necessarily in direct response to that, but every once in a while I come across someone online or a message board, etc., who says, I sent this into X. Let's say sent this into Image Comics and got rejected. What do I do? Well, what do you mean? What do you do? Or how do I feel? What? So
what people do? You're right though. People ask that kind of thing all the time. And how would you respond, Lyndon? Like if you, putting aside the temptation to respond, now you have, you're going to actually help that person.
Okay, so I'm trying to help them. I'm not just trying
You're
to
going-
dunk on them.
Well, not just dunking on them, but let's just yes, I agree. They shouldn't be posting that. Let's just put that aside for a second. They've come to you in a private moment, and it's the proper.
They're not coming to me. They're coming to a public.
I know, but
internet setting. But yes,
they should not be doing that. But let's just put that aside and imagine that instead they were doing the proper thing.
Sure.
And saying, Lyndon, I've been, I submitted this thing to Image Comics. I just got this rejection back. It's upsetting. What do I do now? I don't know what to do next.
All right, so you want my polite response then?
Polite
and it is
response.
Well, rejection is part of being a creative. You can't always control the circumstances in which your book gets published because it's a combination of where's the market at, what resources are available to the publisher, where do they see your book fitting into the marketplace, and
even that particular person. Like
Yeah.
maybe you just caught the wrong guy on the wrong day. And
Correct.
if you were
Yeah.
to apply again in 3 months, it'd be a completely different person.
you can't necessarily predict or understand, comprehend why your book got rejected. And so what you need to do is decide what you want to do next with that book. Where is the next place that you want to send it to? What is your plan to continue to produce this book? Are you going to continue to produce this book, or were you banking on an opportunity that is statistically like winning a small lottery? When you looked at your outlook as a creative, did you consider the very common story that people get lots of rejections, and did you expect to be the exception to
Right.
the rule?
That ties your point of you have to have realistic expectations. Some people honestly, they honestly believe that, if I just write this thing, it'll get accepted and published. And then once it gets rejected, they're like, wait a second, I never considered the possibility that it would get rejected. And it's just a level of delusion that maybe is maybe it was good for them. It got them to the point where they finished that thing, but now they have to kind of get their head screwed on properly, and just kind of be more realistic about the situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And doesn't mean you should stop sending it around.
Right.
It may in fact mean you should send it everywhere, but you gotta do other things at the same time. You
Right.
know?
That's the point that always, like, when somebody just has the one book that they want to make, I'm already kind of writing them off.
Yep.
Because the idea of just having one story in you and being done, and that one story being any good, like I can't see that.
Good.
No,
it happens, but
I was talking to a mentor in comics this week, and we were talking about a rejection that I had received recently, and the rejection, like we briefly touched on a rejection, and then his first question was, "What else are you working on right now?" So that you can, like, while you were
Right.
continuing to shop this project around, it's not the only thing that you're focused on.
it's a
And you
different
had
process.
a long answer for that.
I had a long answer
You had a
for
long
that,
answer.
yeah.
Right, because you never know how things are going to do. Like I think there's a level where you kind of have to you have to have. So one person, this writer Casey, reached out to me and she was asking me a bunch of questions. One of her questions was, she goes, if I've got a movie script and I'm pitching it around, and I want to pitch it around, to try to get it picked up or sold or whatever. She goes, if I'm writing another script, should I wait to be done a few scripts before I start pitching them around, or should I just pitch one around before I start writing another one, kind of thing? And so on some level the question becomes is it worth writing a bunch of stuff before I pitch anything? So
But even on a more granular level, like I'm currently constantly in the process of pitching a novel draft around. And it's common to read in the submission guidelines, you may not hear from us for 6 months after you send this in. So what am I supposed to do for 6 months? Because if you're pitching a novel, the manuscript needs to be finished. You're not working on that book anymore at that point. So if you're going to submit a book and then sit for 6 months and wait to maybe hear a response, like you can be doing other things with that time. You're not just going to sit and do nothing for 6 months.
yeah, without getting deep in the weeds of it, I think what you need is to understand that the process of pitching things to people or submitting things to publishers or putting your work in front of the audience, that whole process of getting feedback, from reviewers or audience members or customers or peers, that's its own process. And then the writing process is, the main process, creating things is your main process, and then you also need a separate process for getting things out into the world in some way, shape, or form. And you got to be doing both those processes. You got to be running them both. You can't just be doing one and not the other. But a lot of people do. A lot of people are more comfortable with one versus the other. And so they'll just focus on one versus the other.
And I'm not saying that you need to be, in the midst of working on a project. I'm not saying, because there are some people that will jump from between project to project to project to project, be working on 4 or 5 things at once. I'm not saying that that's necessary, but you should have a plan when you finish your project A. You should know what you want to work on next, and so that you can start on project B.
Which usually happens in the middle of project A. You're going to come up with project B, C, and D in the middle, and want to jump ship, but then that professional aspect comes in of finishing A before going on to B, C.
Yeah, it's such a writing stereotype, to a meme level, with where people will have 5 work in progress projects that never get finished because they're doing A, they get 3/4 way through that. They start on B, they get halfway through that. They start on C, they work on D, and then nothing ever gets finished. And it's something that my mom used to say growing up, which was that it was important to always be working towards something, and it was okay if the plan changed, but that as long as you were working towards something, you could pivot and not be stuck waiting for something to come to you, because that isn't something that works.
My daughter, when she was in her university degree, and she wasn't sure, I remember we had a picnic during COVID at one point, and she was we were in some sort of weird park that was also a cemetery or something. It was very strange. But anyways, she was starting to stress out because she's I don't know if I want to continue this degree, or do I want to switch my major to this other thing, but then I don't know what I want to do for a job, and I don't know what I'm going to do to this. And I just said, I go, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Guess worst case scenario, let's say you switch to your degree. I go, and then you decide, that you should have just kept with your old degree field. I go, your worst case scenario is you go back to school and you get a second degree. It takes you an extra year. Who cares? And at the end of the day, what are you going to do? As long as you're moving forward in a direction, as long as it's not the absolute wrong direction, you're going backwards, but as long as you're kind of moving in the vague direction you want to be,
as long as you're not closing doors.
Right. And I was always stress that idea, why don't you just apply whenever she's well, maybe I should apply for this, maybe I should apply for this, I'm just apply for them both. You could always say no. You could always offer you the job and you could turn it down. You could always get in the program and decide you don't want to go. What does it cost you? $20 to apply, or whatever. It costs you the time, it costs you maybe a fee, but you just have options, and when you have the options in front of you, then you can decide which of these things you want to do. But if you keep closing doors, as you say, it becomes a hard thing to do, unless that's part of your strategy. I like to close certain doors, but that's just so that I don't,
So you're not led into temptation.
Right. No, honestly, but that's because I now know kind of what I want to do, right? If you aren't really sure, what you want to do or how people are going to respond, right? Just go back to that feedback idea. If you're not really sure how people are going to respond, why not make 5 pieces and just put them all at the table and see what they like?
Yeah. One of my first pieces of advice I give artists who are starting out in the illustration, whether for their portfolio or for a table at a Comic-Con, is shotgun it. Try a bunch of different things. You don't know what the audience is going to react with. You don't know what you're going to enjoy doing most, so just try a bunch of different things, and something's going to stick, but make a bunch.
And you don't even know what you're good at. I often tell writers, you should just write a bunch of different types of things. You might have in your head, I want to write vampire novels, but maybe you suck at writing vampire novels. Right? Or maybe no one wants them. Maybe they're dead. Maybe they're a dead genre.
People love the vampire genre, as I'm going to set out to prove.
But maybe they don't anymore, all of a sudden, right? If it's your whole life, and that's the only thing you think you can do, it's kind of a tough position to be in.
Yeah. My shortcut to wrap my thoughts on seeking out feedback is just expect to get rejected. It's not that hard. Just expect that they're going to say no, and if they don't say no, then great. You're in great shape, and if they do say no, well, you weren't disappointed.
Yeah, my just bouncing off that, I think one of the things that's really important to understand is that their feedback isn't your work. Like, you can, if you get constant negative feedback and nothing but rejection, it still doesn't really change what your work is. It may be that they don't get it. It may be that they're right, maybe but they're wrong, but like it doesn't really have to affect anything. Maybe it should, but it doesn't have to. Like you can just keep doing the thing you want to do. You just might not make any money. How would you tie it up, Justin?
Man,
what's your last thoughts on feedback-ing?
I think I've reached the point in my artistic career that
He doesn't get rejected.
Well, no. I'm okay with rejections, right? Of like, the next 5 pieces I make, I know one of them is going to be a dud, but I still need to do that dud in order to learn something small from it that's going to make the next great piece better. So I think I see rejections and missteps as stepping stones towards better projects in the future. So like I've done entire books that I don't think were like turned out as great as they could have been. But hey, I learned a lot along the way, and I'm going to take the lessons I learned with that dud project and bring it into the next project and make it better. You're always after that better project on the horizon. Rejection is a part of that.
I like to say you could always write another book. Like, if this one doesn't work out and it sucks and everyone hates it, just do another one. But again, to your point before, if you haven't got a body work, it's hard to understand that.
Yeah.
You need to do enough work that you can understand in your bones that if everyone hates it and it sucks, and they're right that it sucks, they should hate it, you could just make another one. So this is been writing the wrong way. Keep writing the wrong way and keep exposing yourself to feedback, and keep your wits about you.